Welcome to the September the 12th, 2006 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, Texas. As we bring you the history of our city and some of the people that are very important in making that history, and a few of them, and like the ones we have on the dais today, that continue making history this very day. And we are just really excited to bring you our history tape number 581. And joining us for this 581st taping that we've done on the history of Grand Prairie, we have three wonderful people from the Grand Prairie Times. That is a wonderful paper in Grand Prairie, Texas, and as of late have really made history in Grand Prairie, Texas, when they took your speaker along with them on a sojourn that was so important to Grand Prairie, Texas, and we wanted to tell you about it. Now we have on the dais today, first of all, the publisher, and we're just so pleased to have Mr. Tom Lewis. Mr. Lewis, thank you for taking time to come and be with us today. We know that a publisher is very busy, very important, and we honor you for coming to be with us today, young man.
Well, thank you. Not as busy as you are, but I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful, that's wonderful. And Mary Jane DeSalvo. Mary Jane, how delightful it is to have you here with us today, because now Mary Jane is the arts and entertainment editor for the Grand Prairie Times. And that's a big job, isn't it? And you had the most you had the most exciting time for many of us that are on the dais here today, because this is about entertainment and some of the arts and things that went on a couple of weeks ago. And so we're pleased to have you with us to help us document the real history of that one day that you all made possible for your speaker and for the people of Grand Prairie to get on the front page of your newspaper in color. And of course, last but not least, and of course we don't mean that physically, but we mean because he's our big man on campus as far as the paper's concerned, and we're just so pleased that engineering director and etc. Shannon Davis, we're just so pleased to have you here, because you were responsible for taking a lot of the pictures that we documented for that wonderful occasion.
Yes.
And now tell us, first of all, I should start probably up at this end with Mr. Lewis, but I'm going to start with you. Give us all of the things that you do for the newspaper, because you work more closely with me than either of our two guests here today. So tell us what you do.
I am the chief editor at Grand Prairie Times. I've been working with the business since about 1995, especially when Grand Prairie Times came on board back in 2001. And I edit the paper. I get out of the office, I go out and I cover stories, I research them. I drive from one end of town to the other, covering about, I'd say, 6, 7 jobs, on any given day.
Yes.
And still go home and actually, work on the paper, actually put it together. I do software engineering, not only just editing the paper, but I actually write programs that help us make the paper better, bring things, it allows everybody to communicate with each other and coordinate every aspect of the paper, from advertising to news to upcoming events, calendar events, so that we can keep track of everything that's
Now, how about your magic camera? You are good at that, young man.
The camera, one thing that we have another photographer, his name is Bob Fitch. He also lives in Grand Prairie. I live in Grand Prairie. And he brought it to my attention that, there's a lot of news, there's a lot of newspapers out there. They have, really beautiful big cameras, but it's not really the camera that takes the pictures, the photographer that takes the pictures. And you have to know how to work your camera. And I have a background in broadcasting, and I've learned how to use the camera and take pictures at any given point. So it's very important and to know how to use that camera.
All right, we're going to get back with you in a few minutes after we get down to the meat of what we're here for. But I've got to get back with Mr. Tom Lewis. Mr. Tom, you've been in the newspaper business how long, young man?
It's been 15 years now.
15 years. And where did you start your career?
Well, the reason for it, because I was in a retail business, and I loved advertising. I did a lot of advertising.
Yeah.
and the Dallas Times-Herald was sold out to Dallas Morning News, and I remember the headline saying, it's going to be the last day. And so when that occurred, it concerned us in the neighborhood where we were advertising, because that was our local paper that we felt like covered the southern sector of the Dallas County rather than the morning news. And they also, of course, had some price differences. They increased their numbers, so they had to increase their price. So it made some advertising unaffordable. So we started a local paper in Dallas on the southern sector to help advertisers advertise their needs and to the public around, I'd say, the Oak Cliff, Grand Prairie area at that point.
And what was the name of your paper when you started?
Dallas Times.
The Dallas Times.
And it's still going.
Yes.
However, we started the Grand Prairie paper 5 years ago.
All right. What magic date in it? 19?
It's 91, and I think it was
1991?
was that April 1?
For which paper? Grand Prairie?
Grand Prairie paper.
Grand Prairie, we officially started December 2001.
December 2001. Oh.
We started putting it in place much earlier than that, but the first issue then.
Yes.
It was a little different than what we'd had in Dallas. All of a sudden in Grand Prairie, they had a need for a newspaper because the morning news had a local paper here for a while, and of course it closed it, and all of a sudden people were crying for local news coverage. Up to that point, we'd been more of an advertising newspaper rather than a real community newspaper. So we had to shift gears. Shannon, born, I'd say raised in Grand Prairie, went to school in Grand Prairie, still lives in Grand Prairie, loves the city, so thank God he was available to come on board. So he's been great to cover the local activities in Grand Prairie. It has been a big changeover because, like I say, having a local paper takes a lot of activity, constant. It's not unusual at 11 o'clock at night time to get a phone call, hey, there's a fire going on here. There's so many things going on. You can't cover all the events. There's too many going on unless you have a large staff, and of course large staff costs a lot of money, so the local community newspapers can't normally have that many people always on staff. But Shannon does a great job of it. We have probably 5 or 6 writers that will go out and write on something for us. We have a main photographer goes out, but we have 1 or 2 other people that sends us photographs quite often.
All right, now you do have other paper cover other cities other than the Grand Prairie Times. Do you have other kind of Times papers?
We do have one, and of course we have the Dallas Times we just mentioned. We have one in Arlington called Arlington News.
All right.
We have one in Fort Worth called Fort Worth News.
All right.
Neither one of those are quite a community newspaper such as Grand Prairie, where this is our home and as where our office is located, and our central attention is in Grand Prairie.
In Grand Prairie. And tell me where your place is located so that people watching our show will know, and I know exactly where you are because I've been there several times, but give us direction.
It's 501 East Main Street, and that's 1 red light west of Beltline Road, so it's real near Beltline in Maine.
That's good. That's you're near Mr. Snodgrass, who is our very good friend and a long-time Grand Prairie businessman.
And he was, it's funny enough that we're in that location, not because of this, but he was on the front page of our first issue.
Oh, he was?
There was a ribbon cutting going on.
Yes.
And not that he was opening a new business there, but
he was happy.
It was some catch-up of some ribbon cuttings that needed to happen and on some existing businesses, and he was the one. So when we started, he made the front page. And had been a long time friend of Mary Jane because she went to school with him. Yeah,
and we're going to get to her in a minute because we're talking about 3 bisons when you talk about Snodgrass and Mary Jane and I. That's it.
But one reason, it's not that we wanted to try to go out and have several newspapers, by the way. To support one single local newspaper is very difficult.
Yes.
If you're going to have a photographer, it may not be enough coverage going on in Grand Prairie.
Yes.
So you have to give him more opportunity so he can cover Arlington, Dallas, or Fort Worth.
We're melded together, Arlington and Grand Prairie and some of the Metroplex cities.
Yeah, some of the activities, especially right along 360, where people don't know if they're in Grand Prairie or in Arlington at that point. But most of those people, a lot of them shop Grand Prairie because that is on the I'd say on the eastern side of Arlington, shop Grand Prairie very heavily. But we went with these other papers to try to lower our cost. You know, one main office, 4 papers is a lot cheaper than one office and one paper.
You bet.
And same goes for all the computer equipment and the people that helps us. So, but Grand Prairie just took over as being the main paper, and that's where all our, I'd say 60 or 70% of our efforts go into Grand Prairie.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And we would like to see the other papers come along to be as strong, but the people in Grand Prairie wanted this, and they just have made us the stronger paper.
Well, I'm just so glad your office is in Grand Prairie, y'all live in Grand Prairie, and
work and shop in Grand Prairie.
Yes, yes, and go to church in Grand Prairie.
That's right, we do. And you know, it's something that when I first started, went to it was an after-hours meeting with the Chamber of Commerce,
Chamber of Commerce,
evening, and a man stood up and he said, my business is located in Grand Prairie, I live in Grand Prairie, I work in Grand Prairie, and I shop in Grand Prairie. And I was pretty impressed with that.
Yes, that was really good.
That was a really dedicated person. I don't know his name because it was, you know, as I thought about it later on, I said, you know, that was really a good statement, and we should all be able to say that has
it's a community
businesses in there.
It's a community that can sustain itself.
Yes, that's right. Now, Mary Jane, arts and entertainment editor. I want to talk to you about the special thing that you set up for a special happening in Grand Prairie, Texas. When the Wheel of Fortune came to Grand Prairie, Texas, to Nokia Theater, well, the council was apprised of this. I received, all the council members received some tickets where we could go out there to witness it. But never in my wildest dreams would I have believed that I would have an invitation from your paper to go with your crew that was going out there, and to be able to not only meet Mr. Sajak and Vanna, but got to talk with them. Oh, yeah. And because all of this happened. Now, I'd like for you to tell me how you all in the newspaper business go about making arrangements for your people to go out and to be able to have that press opportunity. That doesn't just happen. It takes you weeks and weeks prior to these people coming here that you had to do. I want you to tell us what you have to do that.
Okay, well, I've been doing this for 20 years.
All right.
And started in Oak Cliff.
Yes.
And then hooked up with Tom many years ago as somebody that had been in the newspaper business, and, you know, have tried to assist along the way. But as far as the actual media part of it, most of the newspapers are notified when something large is going to happen.
How much notice did they give you all? They let you know a month or so in advance?
Approximately a month before.
Okay.
And Pat and Vanna had been here about 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I had, you know, spoken to a different media company was, I think, handling them at that time. But anyway, Tom and I had the opportunity to go meet with them and do an interview one-on-one.
So you already had experience before this thing?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
They're just fantastic people, just absolutely wonderful people. And we were in line with the largest newspapers to the smallest newspapers, but they treated, you wouldn't know who was with who because they treated us all equally, and it was just wonderful. And then we got to sit in the audience as you did back then. But this time, Amy Printer called me, and I wear 2 hats. I'm kind of like the office manager because I manage the phones, because I have a lot of, besides the arts and entertainment.
You have a lot of duties, don't you?
Right, and so I basically keep my finger on the pulse of everything. So anyway, she called, and it was about a month before the actual taping, and she was telling us about it, and I spoke to Shannon. Shannon and I are in constant contact because I get messages, a lot of people email, and they have the opportunity to speak or to communicate directly with Shannon or any of us through our emails and by calling the offices. So this is kind of what happened, and I passed it on to him, and we passed it back and forth, and I'd speak to her, and she said, well, we're coming, and so they were lovely. They gave us opportunities. They actually taped for, I believe, 3. They did their preliminary of choosing the people, and then they taped for 3 days, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yes.
And so we had made arrangements, and I was unable to go that weekend, and I apologize for that. But I got to talking to Shannon, and Shannon said, "Let's take Ms. Jackson." And I said, wow, sounds great to me. I mean, what more could they want than the First Lady of Grand Prairie? So that's how all that came about. Mostly you can thank Shannon for that, but Amy was a doll. Her assistant was
Kathy
also...
DiMaggio.
Oh, yes,
gave me a
Kathy.
call.
Kathy, oh, I'm sorry, on your end. Kathy, I apologize. Anyway, Kathy really was the first person, the first contact. And so anyway, everybody working together, and the wheel people were fantastic. And I wish I could have been there to see everything that happened that day.
But you had to work at the paper.
I did,
Yes.
and they called me, and they afterwards, and they told me, I spoke to Amy and thanked us and just told us how thrilled they were to be able to speak to you and have everything going on that day. So I know I missed out, but I was there in spirit. So anyway.
We knew that you were, but we knew that you had set up everything that made it so easy for us to get in that I was just almost petrified with fear that everything wouldn't be just right, but you had it all so set up that when we got there, they were expecting Shannon and a photographer, and I ended up, I guess, being whatever photographer it was, the substitute for the photographer. And I did get some real good pictures of Shannon as he made his contacts, and then Shannon was very, very kind. He really covered us well, but I did get a call from City Hall, and they told me that they had recommended that, and then I got a call from Shannon and made the setup when. And you know, that young man even came by my house and picked me up and carried me in his real foxy pickup all the way out to the theater. And we were on a time schedule, and he said, now, I can go out and cover all of this, but I can't stay for all of that because I've got to get back to the paper and do this. And that suited me just fine because it was going to be an opportunity for me to get out of the cage and go out to see this, because I had already given away my tickets that the city council provided me to some of my friends because I had not planned to go out and just watch. But then, when I had an opportunity to go out and just sit through the interviews, I didn't have any idea I would even get to ask a question or anything. But now, Shannon, tell us about your experience getting ready for that. How did you get ready for all of this?
It all happened so fast. I mean, I literally work really long hours, and the days kind of blend into each other, most of the time. So before I know it, between that first phone call, I spoke with Amy Printer. She's the publicist for Wheel of Fortune, and between that first phone call and the day before, when I called and asked. It dawned on me because I talked to you at the city council, asked you if you were going, and the day before, I realized, wow, it would be nice if you were there to not only represent your TV show, but also to help welcome them to the city.
Yes.
And so I called Amy, and I didn't get her immediately. I left a voicemail, and she called me back probably within about 15 minutes. They were at dinner. They're currently at dinner with Pat and Vanna in Fort Worth, and she called back and she's like, "Well, we'll see what we can do," and everything after that just started clicking together, and it was very
y'all made miracles happen.
It was a miracle, and it was
really
very
was.
exciting, and I've dealt with a lot. I mean, I worked 7 years in conferencing in audiovisual, setting up presentations, meeting celebrities, and I've had a lot of experience with that. Meeting highly professionals, so it was just an honor to be able to add that experience.
Are you ready for us to signal to Mr. Ron Scribner, who is our beautiful, wonderful director of this show, and I believe he has some shots that you made there, and why don't we call on Ron to do those, and you explain that now. That's your picture, isn't it?
That's a picture I took from the audience where the media was sat.
Yeah.
That's where we were allowed to take photos from. It seemed like they positioned us at that point where we couldn't really take pictures of the puzzle board. They had strict rules about us.
They didn't want you to get a picture of the puzzle board, did they?
They had rules about what we could take pictures of. And that's Pat. This shot, I took several. I mean, I literally took over 100 photos within the space of a 30-minute taping.
Yes.
And some of the shots were a little blurry. Some of these shots turned out absolutely perfect. There was one shot of the back behind the contestants where it actually showed Lone Star Park, but it happened that the contestants were blurry.
That's how full the assembly was.
This picture right here is actually looking at the audience at Nokia Theater, and there were no open seats left. They said that every day of the taping, the stadium or the room was full. They had no vacancies. So this right here is Pat and Vanna. During commercial break, they actually came out and entertained the audience. They talked about what goes on behind the show. They showed some of their outtakes, blunders. Pat actually, at this point after the shot was taken, he actually walked up into the audience and shook hands and welcomed the city to the city to Wheel of Fortune. And he in a backstage interview, when Ruthie Jackson asked the question, he definitely knew that he was in Grand Prairie and not Dallas. So that was...
Yes, I asked him point blank, I said, Mr. Sajak, I know you may think you're in another city, but do you know where you are? And he said he saw the sign coming into Grand Prairie. It said the next 3 exits are Grand Prairie, Texas. And I knew I was coming to Grand Prairie. So that was very exciting to me. But that was after I gave him our Grand Prairie pin and welcomed him on behalf of our Honorable Mayor Charles England. So.
And there's a picture with Ruthie. She gave the pin to Pat Sajak, and in his hand was a Walt Disney pen. It was shaped like it. He said he was interviewed by Walt Disney TV or radio or something like that before. Yeah. But then Vanna sat down with us and she talked, and this was probably like 10 minutes, probably not even 10 minutes before she had to go into makeup and actually get dressed to go on the show. Within this time frame and the time where it actually taped, it was probably less than 20 minutes.
Yes.
It's just such a quick turnaround that they were interviewing with us. And
there's where Ruthie gave Vanna a Grand Prairie pin and told her we were going to put both Vanna and her children on our prayer list, and she said that was just acceptable, and she gave me a great big nice hug after that. But she's a delightful young woman. Tell us who that is.
This
now.
is the group shot. I don't know how long the picture will stay up there. This is a group shot of, on the left is Susan Rosenberg. She is the head publicist for the Wheel of Fortune. And to her left, actually second from the left on our side, is Amy Prenner. She is the publicist that actually made contact with us and set up the interviews. She was a very big help. We couldn't have made any of this happen without her contact. Beside her is Rupa. She is also a publicist, and to her right, on our far right, is Stacy. And each of them were publicists with Wheel of Fortune, and they were very welcome to, help us get the interview set up.
They were really gracious, and when I found them all there in one room, I said, I would like very much to get a photograph of you wonderful ladies. I want the world to know that the Wheel of Fortune may be run by Pat Sajak and Vanna, but behind the scenes, we have 4 wonderful ladies here. The ladies are in control. And I said, I would like to have a picture of that to put on my television show, and that is my promise to those ladies, that they would see this picture on that. It was an exciting time.
I believe that they had a great time. And one thing Pat said, he said, you definitely know when you're in Texas when everybody wants to make sure that you're feeling good and that everything's fine. And if it's not fine, they will make it fine.
Well, how did you feel about interviewing both of them? Which one do you felt more comfortable with?
Actually, I like Pat because he was a talk show host at one time, and I watched the show.
Yeah.
Pat Sajak show was on CBS. And even though he doesn't really see himself getting back into talk show, he was really great. And I remember on his first talk show, he was very nervous, and he came out and he said that. And he said that he'd never dreamed that he would be interviewing celebrities and other people like that. He was just a talk show host, and he went to broadcasting. So he was very excited. But it's been a pleasure.
It's wonderful. You did a marvelous job. You made one little old lady in Grand Prairie, Texas very, very happy. And several people have asked me for my autograph now that I've done all of this good stuff. But Mary Jane, we want to get back with you for just a minute and thank you for all of the wonderful things that are happening. How excited are you about continuing in as the arts and entertainment editor, and how do you like being in Grand Prairie?
Well, I've been in Grand Prairie all my life, or at least on the edge of it. I just live a mile and a quarter past Loop 12 in Oak Cliff, and I do give Oak Cliff
that
my proper
was
respect.
Kind of Arcadia Parkish?
No, well, a little past that. I'm between
Cockrell Hill?
Between Arcadia Park and Cockrell Hill. It's actually called Arcadia Heights.
Oh, that's good.
Right. My mother saw to that some years ago, and when we had a restaurant there for many, many years, an Italian restaurant. But my goal was, all my friends were in Grand Prairie. I had naturally had my Dallas friends, but my best girlfriend was from Grand Prairie, and she was a gopher, and that was really what I wanted. But then I did end up graduating from Sunset, but I just spent all my time in Grand Prairie.
Now, you know that we Bisons have to stick together.
I know.
Yes. And I'm just so thankful that the person that owns your building lives in Grand Prairie, Texas, too, and really is important. And he was a Bison also.
Right,
and
right.
I want to thank him for doing good things for you all.
We're truly neighbors. Those lines of demarcation may be there, but
we don't notice it.
No,
We have about 1 minute left on the show, and I would like for Mr. Tom Lewis to just really say thank you to Shannon and to Mary Jane for really creating for your host here something that we never expected. I'd like for you to do that and just thank them in your camera number 2. Would you do that for us?
Well, of course, I appreciate both of them so much because people never know it when they read the paper, what goes into it, but Shannon spends not 40 hours a week, not 60 hours,
bukus of
80,
hours.
maybe 100 hours making things happen. And of course, it's one of the things that everybody was excited about. And of course, Mary Jane goes out of her way, stays longer hours than she has to. And when she goes home, she's still making phone calls to confirm everything. So both of them puts out so much effort to make this newspaper possible.
Well, I would like to personally thank you for tolerating the city of Grand Prairie, Texas, because we had been without a cotton-picking wonderful newspaper for so long, and now that you're on the scene, and even if you have competition with other newspapers, we think y'all really have Grand Prairie at heart, and there's some of us in Grand Prairie that think you have a real moxie for being able to get to the scene, help us, and make the city be real important. I want to thank you too, Mary Jane. And Mr. Shannon, I want to thank you all. And I brought along with a Grand Prairie pen. I want you to pass those down to those two. And we've got to wrap up because
thank you.
This is the end of this wonderful history show. And remember that history is as we live and do, and that we document it correctly. Thank you for being with us.